You've worked hard for your money all your life. You hope to retire one day, like so many of us, and enjoy the good life. But if you sat down and examined the full cost of retirement, have you really calculated where you're going to get the money to pay for your dream retirement vision? If you haven't got the money part down, and what I mean by that is, am I going to be able to afford to retire in the lifestyle I've become accustomed to? If you don't have that written down, then this program is just for you.
Welcome to the Ask Brad Show. Be prepared to hear ideas, concepts, and strategies that may challenge the way you were taught to think about saving and investing for retirement. It's time to roll up our sleeves and get to it. And now, the host of the Ask Brad Show, here's Brad Williams.
Good morning. This is Brad Williams, and this is the Ask Brad Show. And today, what we're going to do is really, truly examine and explore the full concept of saving and paying for your retirement. Now, if you've always been under the impression that it's just about putting away as much money as you can for tomorrow, yeah, that's part of it. But you've really not scratched the surface of what retirement planning actually really includes. And a lot of people get blindsided once they get into retirement because they really haven't thought about the full picture. So I'm going to start with the basics this morning. And, you know, this sounds so simplistic. It just is. Retirement planning actually starts by having a plan. Wow, that's a revelation. You know, it's the name, plan, and retirement planning. By having a plan, it means you're not just winging it. You have set out, you've laid out what we call your SWOT analysis, you know, where you look at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And you put all those into a written plan. But I'll bet you something. I'll bet you that 9 out of 10 of you out there listening right now, if you're really honest with yourself, you got a retirement dream, and you got a retirement goal, and you got a retirement idea in your head. And if you're married, you probably haven't shared that with your spouse. And I'll bet you don't have a written plan. I mean, that's what it boils down to. You know, you got that vision, you got a desire, but a written plan? Wow. That's where a lot of people are missing it out. You got to detail the actual numbers and look at what it's going to take to live and what the daily costs are, the monthly costs, healthcare costs. One thing that's not calculated, investment fee deductions. I've met with several people recently that were in some variable annuities that had 3.5%, 3.8% fees. That can really eat up a retirement account. So if you've got a variable annuity you're not quite sure about, that's something we may want to talk about. You can give us a call at 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. So, you know, having a written plan, having a strategy, you know, as I'm working with my clients, I've got one in particular. He's done a great job accumulating. He's got the visions, and now we have a written plan. It includes vacations, where he's going, how much he's going to spend. And so every year he knows whether he is on target, ahead of schedule, or behind schedule. And so that's why having a written plan is important, because it's not the seat of your pants. It's making sure you got a plan. You know, I know a lot of you out there probably asking, you know, do I really have enough to be able to do what I want? Well, I don't know. That's a good question. But I'll bet you that a number of you affluent people out there who have thought you've accumulated enough for retirement, but really didn't sit down and come up with an airtight plan that includes variables, will go broke before they die. And that's unfortunate because you've done a good job saving it. You've done a good job investing it, but you don't realize that a lot of things change once you get from the accumulation stage of your life to the distribution stage. I mean, in reality, what worse end could it be after a life of hard work to watch the dollars run out? I've seen it. It ain't pretty. Let's say you feel pretty confident. And, hey, you know, I've set myself up a good retirement. Well, probably a good idea would be get a second opinion. Oftentimes a second opinion might find some weaknesses in the plan that you've got, because a second eyes from an expert who specializes in this can reconfirm whether you're on the right track and that you've taken into account everything you need to, like inflation, taxes, healthcare, long-term care, Social Security, Medicare options, market risk, sequence of return risk. There are a lot of these variables that need to be put in that plan. And if they're not in there, then you've got gaps that could cause you to be blindsided. So, if you've been saving and investing the best you can, and you're hopeful, but you're not quite positive you're going to live the retirement dream you desire, you may think, well, I may have to move out of state. Now, I don't know if that applies in Alabama where we live. Maybe up north, we get a lot of people coming out because it's expensive. I've even had a good friend of mine, they moved to the Virgin Islands because of their living arrangements. It was a lot cheaper. But to stay where you want, to do what you want, you got to have a plan. And that's what this program is about today, is having a plan. Now, when it comes to retirement planning, you may think, well, I'm a little behind the power curve. Hey, this is what we're talking about today. This is your lucky day. I'm here to help guide you to a plan that will give you the best chance for retirement success. Because anything short of having a written plan and strategy that takes into account all the moving parts of retirement, what you're going to do, how you're going to pay for it, when you're planning on doing that, what those expenses might be, and importantly, how they're affected by taxes and inflation. What if healthcare issues come along? You got to have a roadmap. If you don't have it, you've left something out. I mean, when we go on a trip, we don't just get in the car and point the car in the direction. Of course, today everybody's got a GPS that talks to them along the way, but maybe that's what a retirement plan should be, something that talks to you along the way. But, one detour, one problem could derail the whole retirement. And, unfortunately, you only get one shot at this, because most people are not in the position where they say, hey, I'm going to retire. If it doesn't work out, I'll just go back to work. That's really not what they had in mind when they started thinking about retirement. A lot of people want to retire, and they want to retire now. They may not even want to go to work in their final years. But, if you want to go back to work later in life, that's fine, if you enjoy your work. But you want to be able to have a retirement where you can not have to worry about your needs and spend more time thinking about what your wants are. And to do that, you got to have a written plan. And I guess the reason is, as I've mentioned before, all the variables, retirement's not about one thing. It's about many things. It's getting everything to work together. It's like a team. I know a lot of people watched the game the other night and, were really disappointed. Well, you got to give Clemson credit. They had a plan when they stepped out on that field. They had looked at all the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. They had tried to figure out how they could get ahead and stay ahead, because they knew that had to be the case. They had to get ahead and stay ahead. And that's really what retirement's like. The questions you got to ask, versus being a coach of a football team is, all right, starting with the fundamental, which is where I usually start, Social Security. How are you going to maximize the benefits you get for you and your spouse? I mean, you paid into it. You want to make sure that you get everything out of it that you've got due to you. And this is big dollar decisions. So a lot of people don't realize, think, well, should I retire at 62? Should I retire at full retirement age or wait till 70? And it's more than that. It's having a strategy. Social Security was never meant to be the full retirement plan, but it forms one of the foundations. And it was never intended to be the only thing you're living off of, but it is a foundation and it's a guaranteed source of income. So when we look at some of the fundamentals that I help my clients with, one of those is lifetime income. How many sources can they get guaranteed lifetime income from? And Social Security is one of those. We'll talk about some others later. But I've got a commission report that I'd like to get to you. Understanding and Maximizing Social Security Benefits. We can email that to you if you just call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048 and ask for Understanding and Maximizing Social Security Benefits. And if you'd like, for the first 10 callers, we'll do a free Social Security analysis for you. I normally charge $150 for this. We'll do that free just for the first 10 callers. And that will give you an idea. That in conjunction with the commission report that we put together will give you some good ideas on Social Security. That's that foundational start. And it gets into what strategies you can use with your spouse. When's the best time to collect? What are the options? So that's a real important thing, starting with Social Security. Next is the retirement income gap. You've got Social Security. How much are you going to need to create from savings, from your IRA, other investments? If you have a pension, maybe you got some real estate that you're collecting rental income from, maybe some outside business income. Where's it coming from? How long is it going to come? Is it variable? How much are you going to need? Because having a cash flow analysis as part of that plan is extremely critical. And that's what I do as I'm putting together these plans for my clients, because you want to look at not just this year and next year. You want to look 10, 20 years, have some reasonable estimates that take into account inflation, rising costs. As you get older, travel time drops, but healthcare expenses go up. So you got some variables there you've got to calculate. Then, another thing is looking at the rising costs of healthcare. Some people have long-term care insurance. Some people have other ways. But, in reality, about 7 to 10 of you out there are going to need some form of long-term care. Now, that you have insurance for it is not the critical factor. That it's built into your plan, that's the critical factor. Because there's several ways to do that outside of traditional long-term care insurance. So what we'd like to do is give you the opportunity to get a safe retirement income checkup. It's a quick checklist and it's absolutely free. 844-343-6048. And just ask for the safe retirement income checklist. That's 844-343-6048. No obligation to do business with us on these. These are just something I offer to my loyal listeners for tuning in on.
At Brad Williams Financial Services, we believe in innovative thinking, and we're not afraid to challenge conventional methods in our approach to managing, investing, and preserving wealth. To learn more about Brad Williams Financial Services or to set up a complimentary review,
call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. So, how's this latest stock market roller coaster ride treating you? You've worked too long and too hard, scrimping and saving for retirement to have it exposed to this market volatility or gobbled up by some retirement spend-down scheme. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, hoping for different results. For your free, no obligation, no more volatility information kit, be one of our first 10 listeners to call 844-343-6048 or visit us online at AskBradShow.com. It's time to get off the roller coaster and get serious about how you're planning for retirement using tools and strategies designed to generate steady, predictable income so you may have the retirement you've worked so long and so hard for. For your free, no obligation, no more volatility information kit, be one of our first 10 listeners to call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. Or visit us online at AskBradShow.com. That's AskBradShow.com. Many people contribute to their IRAs, 401ks, and other qualified retirement plans for years without fully understanding the rules, the tax implications, and options that are available until it's too late. It's like driving down the road to retirement without a map, or nowadays a GPS. For your free commissioned report on IRAs, call 844 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. Or visit us online at askbradshow.com. That's askbradshow.com. Call now for your free report. For your free commissioned report on proper tax planning, call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. Or visit us online at askbradshow.com. That's askbradshow.com. Call now for your free report.
Now, getting back to it, I'm going to assume everybody wants a comfortable retirement. I mean, I assume that's why we're all working, is so that we can enjoy the fruits of our labor when we get to that part of our lives where we can take time with the family and spend time with the grandkids and travel. In fact, a client of mine recently, they went on a cruise with their whole family. I think there was like 15 of them, and had a great time. It was their 65th anniversary. Isn't that amazing? But they went on a cruise with the family, had a great time. So they had planned properly. They could do those kind of things. As we look at those of you who are not in retirement, who are looking toward retirement, one of the big deals is pensions. A lot of the clients I deal with that are already retired, the majority of them have some form of pension. And that's changing for a lot of reasons. Back in 1980, about 38% of workers were covered by what's called a defined benefit pension, which is, you retire and you get a check. No matter how long you live, you get it. You may have some for your spouse coming in. It might be reduced, but you're guaranteed that source of income. Well, by 2008, that's down to 20% because most companies, private companies, have shifted to what's called defined contribution, which is your 401k type plan. And back in 1980, there was only about 8% of companies that had those. And now it's about 31, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics. So why did that shift happen? Well, it was actuarial issues. The fact that, we went through some low interest rate environment, and a lot of the companies were experiencing a lot of having to put more money in their pensions to keep them even marginally funded. So they decided to shift the risk of the retirement to the employee. They may match the 401k that the employee is contributing to themselves, but once that person retires, the risk is totally on them, whether they outlive their money or not. And in fact, a lot of experts I've read are thinking that in the private sector anyway, the defined benefit pensions will be gone sometime in the future. There's, state and union employees still have them, but even then, some state and city governments are shifting more to a defined contribution. Even the federal government has changed from the CSRS to the FERS program. And who knows how many times that'll change in the next few years. So as we look at our retirement, there's a three-legged stool. The pension you get from your employer, Social Security, and then savings. That was the past. Well, in the future, as I talked about earlier with pensions, they're going away. So this is why having a plan is really, really important. And you're going to have to use your savings to supplement Social Security. So you're going to have a good plan. As I mentioned about 401ks, those employer-sponsored programs allow you to take money out of your check, pre-tax, put it into an investment account, and grow for the future. You've got others, 403Bs and 457 for nonprofits and schools. But I'm going to lump all these into, the 401k. Well, why should you participate? And if you're not participating, you have one available, you need to reconsider that. First off, you get a tax break. So when you save $1, you're not going to see a dollar drop in your take-home income. It's going to be less than that. And oftentimes you get matching contribution from your employer, which is like getting an automatic return. It's free money, folks. If you have a 401k and you're not taking advantage of every dollar that employer's offering you, you're making a mistake. It's kind of like saying your employer comes in and says, I'm going to give you a 50 cent an hour raise. And you say, well, that sounds good, but I tell you what, just give me a quarter. I'll just take a quarter. And that's what it's like leaving money on the table in a 401k where they match. But it goes deeper than that when you look at it long term. You know, I have people ask me all the time, how do you accumulate wealth? Well, I have some great examples in some clients I have. You know, they started using their 401k many years ago. And, you know, I'll use an example. You know, Mary comes to me early on and says, you know, look, I don't know how to deal with money. You know, I got a good job. They have this plan I can put money into. What should I do? And I said, well, take advantage of as much of it as you can. So over the last 25, 30 years, she's got, you know, $500,000-$600,000 in this plan that she has saved in small amounts out of her paycheck with a little matching from her employer. And it was done in small pieces. You know, it's the old adage about, you know, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. So just remember that. Don't leave money on the table from your employer. Now, as I mentioned, you want to participate, but, you know, a lot of people leave their employers and they have 401ks in several different places. That's often not a good idea. It's often a good idea to look at what other options you've got, because having a self-directed IRA gives you more opportunities, gives you more options for your investments. It's never too late to start. You're going to have more control of your future if you start now. When's the best time to plant a tree? Well, 20 years ago. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today. So get started if you're not doing that. Don't leave that money on the table, because, you know, that money's always yours. Your money's always yours. The match may have a vesting schedule, but you also need to know that you just can't put it in there and just hope that it grows. A lot of younger people are making a mistake of being too conservative with it. They've seen stock market go up and down, so they're too conservative. You got to look at the long term, and that's where working with a financial advisor makes sense to help balance those investments out. Because in reality, when you're using a 401k, they're in mutual funds. Now, a lot of people think, oh, they're watching that money for me. Well, they are in a way, but some of the rules on those funds mean they have to be invested a certain amount in the stock market at any given time. So when we're in down periods, they've still got to be in the market. So when you're in bond funds, and I've done many shows on bond funds, as we see rising interest rates, bond funds are going to have some real challenges. And so looking at that as your defensive posture may not be the way to go. I'd like to offer a commission report, The Hard Lessons of Stock Market History, because I think you might get a lot out of that. 844-343-6048. 844-343-6048. And ask for our commission report, Hard Lessons of Stock Market History. Because I'll tell you, when you leave an employer, you should look at the options of, depending on your age, of rolling into an IRA, because you get to control where it is. You get to control what investments you put it in. And that's important. That really is important. And you're not stuck with mutual funds if you go with an IRA. So just remember this. When you leave an employer, take a look at the IRA option, rolling into an IRA. Now, there are some situations where you may not want to do that when you're right around 55 years old. If you want to talk about that, you can give me a call, 844-343-6048, if that's your situation. A lot of people say, well, should I roll this over to my new employer? Well, you might, but you're still back in just traditional mutual funds when there's so many other things, especially in the markets that we're looking at right now, that have options for you. And so as you're getting close to retirement and you're looking at these 401k, at these retirement accounts, you've got to look at it like a football game. As I mentioned, football, that's the theme this week. You know, it's fourth quarter. You got 10 minutes left in the game. You're 2 touchdowns ahead. You're going to go for it, take the long bomb passes and try to rack up points on the board? Or are you going to grind it out, burn the clock out, and make sure you win the game with a good margin? Because retirement planning is just like football. So having a good defensive strategy in times like we're getting ready to come into now is very, very important. And that is going to be the key because of sequence of return risk and market risk that I've talked about on other shows. So, I talked about a lot of reports today. I've got a report, The Importance of Financial Defense, that I'd love to get to you. No cost, no obligation. Just call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. One of the things that my clients say they like about working with me is that I can make the complex simple. And I think it's important people understand what they're doing with a financial advisor. Don't ever use a financial advisor who just says, we're going to do this and it's best for you. He needs to explain to you why you're doing it. You need to understand that. And you need to ask those hard questions of a financial advisor. Why are we doing this? What will happen in this situation? So make sure that you're looking at all the aspects of it. And again, it's all about having a financial plan. And if you're working with an advisor and you don't have a written plan, it's just a matter of reports of how your investments are doing, but not what they're really for and how they're allocated for what purposes, then maybe we need to talk. 844-343-6048. And I'll give you a free second opinion. That's 844-343-6048.
At Brad Williams Financial Services, we understand the struggles that families and business owners face today. We want to help you develop, implement, and monitor a strategy that's designed to address your personal objectives and individual situation. To learn more about Brad Williams Financial Services or to set up a complimentary review,
call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. A message from Brad Williams Financial Services, LLC, right here in Huntsville.
Do you have a plan or just a portfolio? Is your asset allocation structured for when you start your required minimum distributions? Are you investing for income or investing for growth for your retirement years? Have you reviewed your income options from distributions to make sure they're the most tax efficient as possible? Have you taken a look at the optimal time to take Social Security? And do you have a written plan of why that's a good day? If you've not had these discussions with your financial advisor, maybe you just have a portfolio and not a plan. Call for a free consultation at 1-844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048.
A message from Brad Williams Financial Services, LLC, right here in Huntsville.
Investment advisory services offered through Sound Income Strategies, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Brad Williams Financial Services and Sound Income Strategies, LLC, are not associated entities.
Have you missed any of today's show? Would you like to listen to past shows? We've got you covered 24/7. Visit AskBradShow.com. That's AskBradShow.com.
Investing in the stock market these days is like riding a roller coaster. Leaving a place of safety, get on the coaster, hear the clickety-clack as you experience anticipation climbing to the top of the hill, followed by sheer panic as you plummet back to the earth, hoping you stay on track. You might be brave enough to repeat the process several times, going up and down, but never achieving higher highs and accomplishing nothing but anticipation followed by fear. The stock market has been doing this same ride of volatility with no real growth. Proper education, though, can help you find a better way to grow your money during these times.
Call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048.
I want you to picture this. You die unexpectedly. Your family is grieving. And soon after, your wife starts to sort through what's going to happen next. She starts looking through the desk drawer, the file cabinets, and makes a startling discovery. There is no will to be found. On top of that, she can't find any documents of statements or policy statements for your life insurance and any other of your financial accounts. Is this going to be you? Well, listen up today, and I'm going to give you some tips to make sure it's not you that we're talking about. You know, everybody's got to deal with that. And estate planning is a very, very important part of our finances. As I mentioned in the situation, if something does happen to you, what are they going to find? Papers here and there, scattered all over the place. They're going to have to dig deep to find a will. May not be the right will, maybe a one you did 20 years ago when you were in the Army, any number of things like that. Think of all the accounts that people don't know about that you may have. And it's not you're trying to hide them from your spouse. Maybe she just, they're old or whatever. Maybe you had them before you were married and you just never really wrote them down or organized them to where anybody would be able to clean up after you're gone. So we're going to talk about estate planning today, and let's talk about the basics. First off, why does anybody need an estate plan? Well, obviously to make sure that all your finances are accounted for and all your personal and precious belongings are, but it's to make things easier for your loved ones. They're already missing you. They're already grieving for you. You don't want to compound that by giving them tension and all kinds of issues they've got to sort through, because unless you have settled an estate, you really have no concept of all the things that come into play there. Getting copies of the death certificates, making sure this form is filled out, your DD 214, all that stuff. All of these things that come into play that you accumulate, but we all do over life, and the emotional trauma that comes from the loss, but the financial issues that come after that can be almost as devastating. You think about the transitions the families go through, and it could be a time where families come together and bond, or it could be a time where they're broken apart. And a lot of it has to do with how you have structured things while you're still alive. Because we've all heard stories about what happens when someone dies. And, I dated a girl once who told me a story about when her grandmother died. One of her uncles was nearby, and him and his wife went in the house and pretty much took everything of value before anybody else could get to it, even before the funeral. And that broke that family apart. There were members of them that didn't speak anymore after that. So even the best, closest families can have issues once those events happen, because if you don't have a plan, guess what? Your state probably does. And Alabama does. When you die intestate, which means that you've died without a will, Alabama has a plan for you. And basically, if you're survived by a spouse and children of whom, they're children of the spouse, the surviving spouse inherits the first $50,000 and then one half of the balance, and then the children inherit the remainder. So there's a list of different situations: survived by a spouse or one or more children who are not descendants of the spouse, no descendants, parents. They've laid this all out. And most likely it's not the way you would want it split, because it looks like, as I've reviewed these, in most cases, the spouse is in a secondary position. Yeah, they get the first 50% in many cases, but then it's split. It may be split with a child that you haven't spoken to in 20 years. So you control that. And it's best to take care of that from the get-go. If you've got any questions, get with us. Give us a call. 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. But let's talk now about the financial aspects of it. Because when you go through probate, you're going to have legal costs. The court's going to get some costs. Potentially attorney's going to get some costs. I mean, I've seen estimates as much as 5 to 10% of the assets get eaten up in probate costs. So think about that. And then think about the fact that you own property in different states. Maybe you have a cabin up in the mountains in Tennessee. Maybe you got a condo down in Florida, and you got your house in Alabama. All those get probated in the states that the property's in. So that's probating 3 times, folks. So, you could have tax issues along with that. So the probate costs, the tax issues, there are so many good reasons why you need a good estate plan. And, I think probably looking at history is a good way to go about it, because you can learn from people's past failures. I've got some signs up in my office that are really kind of a montage of stories of estate planning failures that a lot of my clients really enjoy. It seems like when they're waiting in the lobby for me and I'm with another client, and when I come out, they're not sitting in one of the comfortable chairs reading the Wall Street Journal. They're standing in front of those framed posters reading all the estate planning failures. And I think one of the glaring ones, everybody remembers Walter Cronkite, or at least people in my generation do. And he was kind of the voice of America, so to speak, from the news standpoint, the conscience of America. I think he may have even been referred to once. But when he died, he had some issues because he didn't do a good estate plan. And lo and behold, there was a girlfriend involved. And because he didn't take care of her in the estate plan, she got left out. And that created a lot of issues, especially with the family when they found that out. Another one to think of is Sonny Bono. And, you know, again, in my generation, remember Sonny and Cher. And when he died unexpectedly, I believe it was a ski accident. I think he ran into a tree or something like that. His widow, because there wasn't an estate plan and will and trust, his widow had to petition the court to make business decisions on his behalf. Now, here's a guy who was a congressman, a successful businessman, an entertainer, and you would think as much as he dealt with money that he would have planned for things like this, but folks, he didn't. And he forgot one other thing too. Apparently a love child popped up toward the end of that process and said, hey, where's my fair share? So many things can happen, folks, many things. And what does an estate plan do? Well, it gives you a clear disposition of your assets, whether they're financial assets, whether they're emotional assets, you know, family heirlooms, jewelry, silverware, china, those type of things. By putting those in your will, you're making your wishes be known who they will go to. And what I usually coach people to do if they're not using a trust and they're just using a will, and most of their assets are in financial instruments like IRAs or 401ks or annuities or life insurance, bank accounts, these things that can have a transfer on death or a payable on death, a TOD or POD as they're respectively called. Make sure that you have those documents in your personal papers, some kind of a document from the institution confirming that that is who you have as the beneficiary. Because, for example, if you do a beneficiary change on a life insurance policy and you make a copy of the form that you sent into the insurance company to do that and you put that with your personal papers, well, that's fine and dandy, but it has no bearing. Unless they have confirmed in writing back from you that that change has been made, you may as well consider it hadn't been made. Now, once you get that letter, you need to make a copy or keep the original with your personal papers. That way, your custodian, your executor, whoever's coming in behind you, has a clear vision of what your intent was and from a legal standpoint, who it's supposed to go to. And when you do that, make sure you set up primary and contingent beneficiaries. And when we get back from break, I'm going to talk to you about why that's important.
At Brad Williams Financial Services, our goal is to develop enduring, long-term personal relationships with our clients, knowing that you have placed your trust in our expertise and dedication. To learn more about Brad Williams Financial Services or to set up a complimentary review,
call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. Are the gifts you plan to leave behind really safe? Learn how even the most generous plans for your assets you intend to bequeath can be undone by taxes, legal snags, healthcare costs, and other avoidable pitfalls. For your free commissioned report on estate planning, call 844-343-6048 or visit us online at askbradshow.com. Learn what you need to know about how to protect your estate against excessive taxes, how to spare loved ones the cost and headache of probate, and how to avoid the most common estate planning mistakes. For your free commissioned report on estate planning, call 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. Or visit us online at askbradshow.com. That's askbradshow.com. Call now for your free report. Make sure the gifts you plan to leave behind will be safe.
All right, now that we're back, we're talking about what are the components of a good estate plan. Of course, clear disposition of assets, what your intent is, naming the beneficiaries on your financial documents, a primary and contingent, because you don't want to think about this, but it could be that you and your wife die in a common accident. And if that's the case, you want to have a secondary beneficiary. And in fact, when you're dealing with financial documents, specifically 401ks and retirement documents, it is critical that you have named beneficiaries, primary and contingent. Because if you do, then they have the opportunity to do the stretch and continue that IRA and continue the tax deferral that you've set up. And all they have to do is take a required minimum distribution based on their life expectancies. If they're a non-spouse, and if they're spouse, there's some things in there you got to know about. You know, are you already taking your own RMDs, or if not, that's real important. So working with a financial advisor who understands these aspects of retirement plans and beneficiaries is very important. There's another thing that comes into play too, and that is, how do you want your beneficiaries to be set up? Should they be set up per capita or per stirpes? And those are legal terms. Per capita would be if I have 2 children and I name them as my contingent beneficiaries. Let's say I name my spouse as primary and we die in a common accident, so it goes to the contingent beneficiaries per capita. Then it would go to those children and those children alone. If one of those children predeceased the other one, then it would all go to that one children if that happened before our death. So let me clarify that to make sure. In fact, why don't we look at it as primary beneficiaries? I name my 2 children, my 2 daughters, as primary beneficiaries, and one of them dies and I have not taken the time to change it all to the other. Well, it all goes to the other one if it's per capita. Now, a lot of families don't want to do that. They would rather, if I've named my child, any children from that child should be next in line. So it would continue down that line to the next available person. That's a per stirpes. So it's real important that you know the difference on your beneficiary form, whether it's a per capita or per stirpes distribution. And again, working with a competent financial advisor or a good attorney will help you determine that. And frankly, folks, not all financial advisors are really good at estate planning type stuff. Some of them are really good at setting up accounts and getting you in some good mutual funds, and some really dig down deep and help you with holistic planning. So I think it's important to go with one that takes a holistic approach to everything and asks the hard questions. Because if you're dealing with a financial advisor who's really not asking these hard questions, you got to question that relationship. Let's get into wills now, because that's always a big question. Should I have a will or should I have a trust? Well, it could be you need both. A trust with a pour over will. It could be that because you've got all your assets in financial instruments that can be generated from a beneficiary form from the institution, you may not need a trust. Now, trust, I'm not going to get into all the legal reasons why you should get a trust. This is just a basic estate planning show. But when you're using a trust, it's usually for some type of protection. There's an old legal saying, when there's no trust, get a trust. So as long as you don't have any family issues, like you don't want your son-in-law to get any of the money, that it should all go to your daughter or things like that, well, that's when a good trust attorney can come into play, and you may want to consider a trust. But if everything's fairly simple, then a will and exercising the right judgment on your beneficiary forms may be what you need to do. Now, all wills must go through probate. In Alabama, there's a minimum 6-month probate to allow any creditors to make any claim on the estate should you owe them any money. There are instances where exceptions to that in simple situations, but remember that. So when you're making out your estate to be the beneficiary of things like retirement accounts, you might want to think about that, because you're creating a lot of tax issues and other issues that you could really avoid by naming a living, breathing human being as the beneficiary. Now, another thing about probate and wills is that when a will is probated, it's public knowledge. So everybody knows what you have. It's a public document. Anybody can go in there and look at it. It's kind of like a divorce. Most people don't realize that, if your neighborhood busybody really wants to know about your divorce, all they have to do is go to the courthouse. So, whereas trusts are private, nothing's publicized. So let's go back to wills just for a second. Let's say I own property in multiple states. Well, that will is going to have to be probated in the multiple states. In every different place I own a different asset, it's going to have to be probated. A trust avoids that. So when you're looking at a trust, your trustee's in charge of it. Of course, a revocable trust, you could be the trustee. You could have a living trust. You want to make sure you have a successor trust. And again, the purpose of this show is I'm not trying to give you legal advice because I'm not an attorney. I've been in this business for over 30 years. I know a lot of the key components of it to give you suggestions, but you should always seek the advice of a competent lawyer. I use one firm for most of my clients that does a great job. And in fact, I've had David McCurry, who's one of the partners on here, to do estate planning. He does a great job. The issue with trusts is you got some creditor protection, you got some privacy. There's a lot of things in a trust that may make it a go-to place for you. If you have rental property, things like that. If your estate is not a simple estate, then looking at a trust may be worth the time. You may come out of it finding out you can do it another way, but it's always worth the investigation. I want to make an offer, and we've had a lot of interest in our beneficiary directory, which kind of dovetails into what we're talking about today. And that is a book that I think is phenomenal. It talks about how to do the things we're talking about today. And there's a workbook that goes with it. And it was written by a guy that went through this with his family and decided, whoa, this is too complicated. It's got to be simplified. And I do this with a lot of my clients. I go through this process with them, but I'm making that offer for the first 3 callers at 844-343-6048. That's 844-343-6048. If you're one of the first 3 callers, we're going to mail you the beneficiary directory and the workbook. It's like a $45 value on Amazon, folks. This is not just a trinket. This is something very valuable and could be very useful to you. And as a courtesy to my listener, this week we're giving it to the first 3 callers. That's 844-343-6048. We talked about trust, and of course you got revocable trust and irrevocable trust. Revocable means that at least long as you're living, you can change them. Irrevocable, once it's set up, it's done. You have special needs trust. This is important if you've got children who have special needs and you want to continue things. There's also some ways to fund those trusts. I've done a lot of those with what we call second to die life insurance plans, where the benefit is paid on the second death. Has usually a little more relaxed underwriting standards if there's any health issues there, but it provides instant liquidity to the estate so that you're not having to worry about keeping so much aside in your retirement years to make sure that child is taken care of. You've got it taken care of on the second death. So that's something to look at if that's your situation. So far, we talked about wills. We talked about trusts and why they're important, but there's some other legal documents in an estate plan that are very important. A durable power of attorney. And that can come into play, for example, when you've been incapacitated. You've got a springing power of attorney that happens when you've had an instance that you're incapacitated and you're not able to make decisions, whether it's due to physical or mental capabilities at that time. And then immediate. Now, be careful of the immediate because you can have issues with that. But again, understand that when you're talking about powers of attorneys, there's 2 different kinds, and that's something to really get with when you discuss a will and a trust with your attorney to make sure that gets taken care of. I'll tell you another thing is an advance directive for health care, because I know a few years ago that was pretty prominent with that Terry Schiavo story where, she was incapacitated in the hospital and then they had to spend all kinds of money on upkeep, and some of the family wanted to pull the plug, some didn't, and there was no clear directive there of what her desires were. So make sure that when you do a advance directive, you make clear your wishes. Do you want to be kept on life support? Do you not want to be kept on life support? So real critical issues there. We've been talking today about the components of a good estate plan. Well, a lot of people don't get started for many reasons. And probably one of the biggest reasons is, where do I begin? That's a big question. Where do I begin? It seems like such a daunting task. Well, as in anything, it's often best to do it in small steps. Gather your documents. Get your financial documents together, your retirement accounts, your life insurance, your company benefits. Get the booklets for those or the pay stubs to show what's being taken out of your pay and where it's going. Make sure you've got your beneficiary documents from the different providers. And oftentimes you can go online, print them off. You can call and get a copy of that document and then start building up a file of the documents you need. Make a list. Kind of brainstorm is a good idea that I would suggest is start writing down. Just take your tablet, start writing things down that you have and that you think you have, and then start trying to locate them one by one, putting them together. And that's kind of what the beneficiary directory does that I have offered to the first three callers. But it helps you get in that organizational process. And then once you do that, you're going to have a good idea of what you have. And then it's a matter of, all right, how do we want to dispose of this? I've told this story on the show before, but I'd like to tell it again because I think it's important. It illustrates what can happen in a family. And yes, get your beneficiary set up, get all the financial documents where you've got everything in writing. But one of the key things comes in is, as we're cleaning things up, what about all those special family heirlooms and the mementos and the china and silverware and the antiques and, the furniture and all these things? Well, my mom passed away in 1997 after battling cancer valiantly for 12 years. She was quite an example to everyone around her and a testament to it's not always how you live. Your life is sometimes about how you die. And she was very valiant and just support for everybody was amazing. But I noticed my sisters putting their names on some of her valuable antiques because she was big into that. And I went to her and I said, look, Mom, you've given me the best thing that you could give me by being my mom. But you're going to have some issues with the family. There's 5 of us kids. I said, you need to come up with a plan because this thing they're doing, although they don't think there's anything wrong with it, could create divisions. And she said, okay. Well, come to find out, she put in her will and she created a lottery. And after my dad had moved on to another home and we were closing up that home and he left everything there for us that he felt she wanted us to have. And we drew numbers, all 5 of us, one Sunday evening, drew numbers out of a hat. And that was our turn. And each of us got to pick one thing and put it in a corner. And that was our thing. And what ended up happening, instead of it creating strife, it ended up being a very great bonding evening for me, my brother, and 3 sisters, sharing memories of each of the mementos that we talked about and that we pulled. What I found curious is that the high dollar stuff didn't even go first. It was the things that meant something to us personally. And so by doing that, my mother laid out a plan to prevent us from going through what I described to her. And, it was great. And I share that with you because, that may help you. So in closing here, make sure that when you die, there's not a mess to clean up. And there's ways to do that. In fact, part of a regular review with a financial advisor ought to be your beneficiary forms on everything. Has anything changed? Because things do. Well, it looks like we've run out of time again. I appreciate your listen. I appreciate the calls. Got a lot of calls over the holiday, and we really appreciate that. So you have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.
That's all the time we have for today. To learn more about Brad Williams Financial Services or to set up a complimentary review,
call 844-343-6048. That's 844 888-343-6048.
Investment advisory services offered through Sound Income Strategies, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisory firm. Brad Williams Financial Services and Sound Income Strategies, LLC are not associated entities.